So, okay. So, so what we have done is, so I think this is what we have seen. So after this, we are talking about how to communicate with the database. So Flask doesn't provide any inbuilt ORM. So there is no inbuilt ORM. So if you want to communicate with the database, you are using ORM tool, and there are different ORM tools out there. And within that, the first one is, yeah. So this is one ORM tool. Most of the times you'll be using this only. So first thing is you have to install this. Okay. You have to install. So you have to install Flask. Sorry. You have to install what here SQL Alchemy, right? So first step is, so what are the basic steps here? Basic steps to work with. Okay, SQL Alchemy, right? So what are the basic steps here? The first one is you have to install this library. So first one is pip install. Pip install. So what is the name of this is Flask hyphen SQL Alchemy, right? So first you have to install this library because this is an ORM tool which is for communicating with the database. Okay, this is an ORM tool to communicate with the database. So open the VS Code. So open the terminal here. So here what you do is, so pip install. So pip install. So Flask, okay, Flask SQL. So try to install this library. Okay, right? So actually some of them are already installed. Yes. So what once it is installed, now this is a library, this is a ORM tool which you are using to communicate with what database. Okay. You can also use MySQL. I mean, you can use even drivers, what we have used in Python. If you want to communicate with the database, your application can use these drivers also. Suppose if you want to communicate with Oracle database, you can use Oracle DB. If you want to communicate with the MySQL database, you can use what MySQL connector, what you can use MySQL connector. Even this, you can use it to communicate with the various databases. But here you are communicating with using raw SQL statements. The problem with the raw SQL statements, okay, is these are database dependent. Okay. But if you want to develop a database independent application, so you are not using any SQL statements. That conversion is done by which tool? ORM tool. So this is ORM, and what your ORM will do, you are communicating with the database using class assign. You are communicating with the class assign objects. So every method of ORM Every method of ORM is converted into which statement? SQL statement. And this SQL statement is given to what here? Database. But we are not writing any SQL statements. Okay. we are we are communicating with the classes and objects. So yeah, these objects provide methods, and every method of ORM is converted into equivalent SQL statement so that you can develop a database independent applications. So once you install the ORM, then first step is configuring database. So compulsory you have to configure the database. So now in order to configure any database, okay, for example, I want to configure. Second step is within your application, you have to configure what database. So when it comes to the Django, you configure database. When you are working with Django, you configure database. Where you configure database, you configure database by using settings dot by using what settings dot py. You'll try to use settings dot py. In settings dot py, you define the database configuration. Where in settings dot py, okay, you do the database configuration in settings dot py. But here you don't have any separate module. You don't have any separate module. So database configuration required what it required two things. One is data source. It required only one thing. What it required is a data source. This data source, or you can call it as DSN, data source name. What it required is data source name. Data source name. Data source is nothing but okay, data source name. So what data source contain? The data source contain, suppose if it is MySQL, you will try to define if it is a data source, if it is Oracle or MySQL, what do you define? What do you define? You define the IP address. So where your database is running, okay, IP address or what host name, and you try to define the port number. Okay, you try to define the database name. Okay, you try to define username, that is database username and database password. This you can call it as what here? Data source. So what is the data source required is IP address. IP address or host name means where your database is running, and what is your database port number is, what is your database name is, what is your username of your database, what is the password of your database. All these are required in order to communicate with the database. Okay, first I'll not tell you MySQL. First I'll tell you configuring SQLite. Okay, because that is local database. Okay, and it is not a server, it is a file. Okay, so first I'll tell you configuring of. So this is a configuring of configuration of SQLite SQLite database. So if you want to configure SQLite database, okay. So anyway, first step is you have to create the application. What you have to do is first step is anyway you have to create one application. Application has to be created. So configuration of SQLite database. First step is you have to create the application. So you know how to create the application. So anyway, application is Anyway, first thing is you have to create the application. So create the application first. First step is here again, create application. Create which application? Flask application. Create a Flask application. Okay. So how you create a Flask application like this? Application equal to Flask. Application equal to Flask. So create a Flask application. After creating a Flask application, second step is, so after creating a Flask application, so what you have to do is, so after creating a Flask application, do the database configuration. Second step is database configuration. How you do the database configuration? Using application object. Your application object, your application object. APP is referring to which object here? Application object. Which application object here? Flask. Flask application object. And this application object is having one method called configure. What is the name of the method? Configure. And here you have to define one environment variable. And these are predefined environment variable. So what is the name of the variable is SQL Alchemy caps. You have to write caps. Okay, SQL Alchemy. Okay, you have to write caps and database. Okay, database URI means uniform resource identifier, means where your resource is there, where your resource is there. You are telling the resource name. I mean, where your resource is there, that you are defining it by using one environment variable. So this is a list. I mean, this is a dictionary which contain the key and value. So what is the name of the variable is SQL Alchemy underscore database URL, URI, and here followed by the path. I mean, suppose your database is there in the same project folder, directly give. Suppose my database name is, okay, employee dot employees dot or some database name db dot SQLite 3. But where this database it search for, where it will search for this database in the current folder. It will search for this database in current folder because SQLite 3 is a database file. Actually, it is not a server, right? It is a file. It is file based. Okay. Are you giving any username, password, everything? No, you are not giving any username and password. It is just like what do you call it as workbook. Like if you work with Excel, what do you have? Workbook. I mean book, and within that book you find what sheets. Now here also DB is what here like a workbook. Inside this what you have tables. Means it is stored in the form of file or not? Yes. This is one database file. It is not a server where you connect. Okay. So but anyway you have to define the database resource name, and what is the resource name is db dot SQLite 3. So, but this configuration is done by using what here? Configure application dot configure. Then after that, if you want the changes to be done automatically, then you are trying to use one more variable, one more environment variable, application dot configure. So I say no, configure is a dictionary. So there also in Django also in settings you find what database configuration is a dictionary which contain the key and values. But here you directly give the key because you're not writing in a separate file. Okay. So here one more environment variable, whether you want to keep track of SQL Alchemy. Okay. underscore. So track. So there is one variable called track modifications. Track modifications. Okay, now if any changes are there in your model, okay, you want that changes to be done to your database. Okay, so this value can be either boolean. This value is a boolean value, and this can be either true, or this can be either what here false. But if it is a true, then the changes will be done what automatically. But if it is a false, the changes will not be applied automatically. You have to run every time whenever you want to apply the changes. Okay, now these two things you have to define it. One is URI, you have to define it, resource identification, and second one is modification, track modifications. So this is a second step. That is what you mean by database configuration. After database configuration, you need to you need to connect you need to connect this application with what SQL Alchemy. It means configuring database again. See here you do the database configuration. How you do the database configuration? By saying application.configure. Okay, configuration is done. Then you need to communicate with what? Database by using this configuration done in which application? Flask application. It means Flask application should communicate with what? Database. But how Flask application communicate with the database? By using SQL Alchemy. How it communicate with the database? By using SQL Alchemy. So for that, okay, so configuring. So next one is configuring. So configuration of, okay, configuration of which one? ORM. You have to configure ORM. For that, I'm saying from what is the name of the library is from SQL underscore alchemy. Okay, SQL underscore alchemy import. Import, there is a class. What is the name of the class is SQL alchemy is the name of the class. Okay, now you need to configure. Means what you have to do is now you have done the configuration in which application? Flask application. Now this configuration has to be used. This configuration details has to be used by which one? SQL Alchemy. It means your application is communicating with what? Database by using which tool? ORM tool. Then you are creating what you are creating? Database. You are creating database by saying SQL what? Alchemy, and then followed by SQL Alchemy, and then followed by which one? Application. So it means your Flask application, what is the meaning of this? Your Flask application is communicating with the database, or your database. What is your database is SQL Alchemy. And this SQL Alchemy should communicate with which database? I should communicate with which database? db.sql db.sqlite 3. But this configuration is defined in which application? Flask application. So your SQL Alchemy uses which configuration? Application configuration details and establish connection to what? Database. So now DB represent which database? db.sqlite 3. DB refers to which database? db.sqlite 3. Going on. So these are basic steps. Okay, now after configuring configuration of ORM, what is the next step you have to do is you have to no migrations here. You cannot run separately any migrations, but you have to create what tables or models, okay, within the database. For that, what you have to do is so for that first you have to develop a model. You have to create a model, right? You have to create a model. Yeah, up to this you understood, right? So what you are doing first, install the Flask SQL Alchemy. Now this is your database. Okay. I mean this what you are using to communicate with what database. So data source name, and you are using IP address or host name, port number, database name, username, and one more is password. But here I take a local database, then you don't require to do anything. Okay, we are not doing anything, right? Now this is a database configuration. In database configuration, yeah. See what you're learning is, अरे क्या बोल रहा है यार, मैं heading क्या दिया? Yesterday, how to communicate with a database, right? Yes. How you are communicating with the database using ORM tool, and what is the name of the ORM you're using? Yeah. Yes, we are not using any SQL statements. Let SQL statements are done by whom? ORM. So next step is you have to create what model. So creating model. Model represents table. Model represent database table. Okay. So model is nothing but a class. Model is nothing but what here? Class. You are creating a model. Suppose I'm creating a model called something like a student. But student is a model, right? And they should inherit which class? Model class. Student is a model class. I mean, student is a class, but they should inherit which properties? Model properties. If it is Django, you have a separate module. What is the name of the module? Models. Models is a module and you are inheriting from models module. But now you are writing a class, and what is the name of the class is student. But student is a model. But how you define the model? By inheriting DB. So what is DB represent? ORM. Which ORM? SQL Alchemy dot. What is the name of the class is model. Getting or not? Okay, DB dot model, and define the column names. Define the column names are what field names. Okay, for example, student is having roll number. Okay, roll number is DB dot. DB refers to what? Model database. Database. DB refers to what? Database. And within that database, you are creating what? Model. Model means what? Table. Which table are you creating? Student table. DB dot. DB dot. Define the field name. Define the field name by saying db dot. There is one property called which one? Column. There is a property called which one? Column. And this column db dot column, roll number is one column of which type? Db dot. What is the name of this is? Integer. Db dot integer, and remaining are same. You just define what is the meaning of this is primary key. So db dot integer primary key, and primary key equal to what here? True. So here I created one column. What is the name of the column is? Roll number. Then I'm creating another column called name. Okay, name. And name is again db dot. What is the name of the type is? Column. db dot. What is the name of this is? String. And you can define the size. Okay, name some 30. I've given what here? 30. a roll number, name, course. Okay, db dot, you represent number of columns. Okay, there is a column db dot. What is the name of the type is string. I just write 20. Done this. Now here we created a model with how many fields? Three fields. That is roll number, name, and course. Then after creating a model, what you have to do? You have to do some migrations, right? But here I said you don't have any migrations. What you have to do? You have to create database. You have to create tables. Next step is you have to create a database. That is what will happen in migrations, right? Make migrations means it will create a database schema. It will not touch the database. But once you say migrate, then it will create database. Database means database should exist. Okay, then in that database, it will create what? Tables. But if it is SQLite, it will create database, and within that database, it will create tables. Okay. So you have to create database, and you have to create what next? Tables. Create database and create tables. Okay. Then how you create database and tables? Okay, by using which one? DB. DB refers to which database? Or DB refers to which database? SQL Alchemy. It is a model. Actually, it is a model, and this ORM tool or ORM tool, and this tool uses which database? DB.SQL like 3. Then with the DB, okay, so what you have to do is you have to create. So you have to create. See, you can simply write DB dot. DB refers to which database? DB refers to which database? SQLite 3 database. But who's communicating with this database? SQL Alchemy. Who's communicate with this database? SQL Alchemy. I can say DB dot. Simply I can write what? Create all. But this you run how many times? Only one time. You don't run this every time. You run how many times here? Only one time. Getting or not? So simply write db dot create all. Create database and tables. Okay. So these are the basic steps. Okay. So now anyway, every time you don't install, and every time you don't configure. Okay. Every time you don't create database and tables. How many times you do this? How many times you do this? Only one time. Only one time. Migrations migrate is done not every time. It is done how many times? Only one time. Okay, right? Yes. So let us see practically. Yeah. So now go to the VS Code here. We'll just remove all this. Uh, we'll take another project. Uh, another. Okay. Okay. So I created one more folder here. Okay, right? So in this project, now first anyway, you have to create one. What you should create? Application. So this is some application one dot py. So you have to create the application. So from Flask, import Flask. So application equal to Flask. application equal to Flask underscore underscore name. Means you are creating Flask application in which module? Current module. And what is the default module name is main. But if you import in another application, the name is what? More application name. So that is nothing but app1.py. Okay. Then next is you have to configure app dot. So this is nothing but what database what here configuration. So database configuration app dot configure app dot configure. So SQL Alchemy database URI you have to define it. Okay. So I just copy this. It is a dictionary. It is a dictionary here. Okay. So dictionary contain the key and values. So here you have to define the value. URI means generally URI. When you talk about URI, right? Suppose you are working with web. In web also you try to type URI. In browser you type URL, right? How you type the URL by saying HTTP? Yes or no? HTTP. We'll say 127.0.0.1 port number. Okay, some port number, right? And slash. You define the resource or not? Yes. Here you define the path along with the resource name. A resource name is login. Then it will try to access which resource login. But here, how you are communicating it using one protocol. Here, what is a protocol is HTTP. Okay. And once you are communicating it, you are communicating with which server? Or you are communicating with which server? You are communicating with which server? Huh? No, 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 no. सर्वर बोले तो लोकल होस्ट बोलते क्या यार? हाँ? सर्वर कौन सा टाइप का सर्वर है? HTTP server. Which server? HTTP server. You are communicating with which server? HTTP server. Localhost server नहीं होता और IP address है. Host name, I mean IP address के जगह what you are using? Host name. Okay, server is a program here. Server is a program. Which server are you communicating with? HTTP server. HTTP client to talk to HTTP server. Okay, you are sending message using which protocol? HTTP. That understand by which server? HTTP server only. Yes or no? In the same way, now here also you are defining URI or not? Yes. Now here also you are communicating with which database? So you have to define database type and that you can call it as a protocol or not? Yes. So you have to define that. You have to define that. Okay, here first you have to define SQLite. If it is MySQL, you have to write MySQL. If it is Oracle, you have to write what? Oracle. I'll tell you. MySQL, I'll tell you. SQLite. What is the name of this is? SQLite. SQLite HTTP colon, right? In the same way, SQLite colon, okay, slash and slash, SQLite colon slash and slash. So there you also put HTTP colon slash. Okay, slash means one slash. If you want one slash, you have to write what? Two slashes. Okay, slash and slash, and then define the database name. Then define the database name. Okay. So this represent what here? This slash represent what here? Separator. And now where you want to create a database in the root. And what is your root folder is project 2. Then you should use one more slash. I should use what? One more slash and then followed by database name. You can give any database name. My database name is something db dot some SQLite. Okay, db dot SQLite. Anything, any extension you can give it. Okay. So what is my database file name? db dot SQLite 3. Okay. So I think you understood what is this SQLite is. Okay, HTTP client to talk to which server? HTTP server by using which protocol? HTTP protocol. This represent now your SQL Alchemy is communicating with which database? SQLite 3 database using which protocol? SQLite 3. So this represent to which database you are communicating, to which server you are communicating, which type of server you are communicating, that is defined by using type protocol, type HTTP or FTP or SMTP like that. Okay. Then next one is application dot configure. Application dot configure whether you want changes to be applied. Okay, track modifications. Track modifications. Okay, track modifications. I don't want track any modifications. I just write here what? False. Right? So application dot configuration. If you want to keep track changes, then you have to say what here true. See, if you want, you can also create a migrations file, but for that you have to install one more module. Another module you have to install, that is Flask migrations. By using that Flask migrations, you can keep track of changes. You can create a SQL schema and then you can do what? Migrations. But that is optional. It's not compulsory. It is what here? Optional. You can directly create database and their models. Okay. So application.configure equal to false, and then create a database from Flask Alchemy. Okay, from Flask SQL Alchemy, import this. So you have to import this library. Okay. So what is the name of the class? SQL Alchemy. And this model, I mean, this ORM tool uses which configurations? Application configuration. Which application? Flask application. It uses which configuration? Application configuration. Which configuration? Application configure. See here, SQL Alchemy is a class, right? And this represent your database. Okay, but it uses which database details? The database details defined in which application? Flask application, right? Then after that, I'm saying here db dot db dot create. But before that, you have to define the model. So there is a see everything you are writing in one class. You are writing everything in one program. It is one program. In this program only you are writing configurations. In this program only you are creating a model. In this program only you are doing what? Creating database and tables. Everything you are doing in one program or different program? One program. Because it doesn't have a separate database structure. But can I write this in separate programs? Yes. Now I want model, then I can write this model in separate program. But I have to write in separate program by giving some name. Okay, right class. And what is the name of this model is student. Student db dot. What is the name of the class is model. Okay, db dot model. I'm saying here roll number. So already we created, right? Copy this. White time waster. So created model. So after this, what you have to do? You have to create tables. You have to create table means you have to create database, and within the database you have to create what? A table. You have to create database, and within that you have to create a table. So for that you are saying db dot what is that? Create all. db dot create what is the name of the method is? Create all. Create I think underscore all. Create all. Okay, right? Yes. Let us run this code. Save this. But here we have not created any, we are not running any server. We are not running any server. If you want, you can run the server. How you run the server? How you run the server? If underscore underscore name equal to underscore underscore main. What do you write? Application dot run main. Okay. So main. Follow here. This one. Configure. Okay. Okay. So if name underscore underscore name equal to main, then what do you do? The application dot run. Run what? Debug. So debug equal to what? True. So that's all right. So let us run this. But sometimes it's required context also, because you are creating this database and database table in which context? Okay, you are creating this database and database table in which context you have to define it. Let me first run this directly without defining the application context. But sometimes it required to define which context, application context. Application dot application underscore what is that? Context. Application dot application underscore what? Context. So context is nothing but, what is the meaning of context here? Context. Okay, this is a class context. This is which context? Class context. Okay, in the same way, this is your application context. Must create this database and table in context of which application? Flask application. For that you are saying application dot application context. Okay, it is a method, and that return which object? Context object. That return which object? Context object. Context object. So that context object, because where it is looking for model, where it is looking for model, I should look for the model. Where it is looking for model? Within the same application or different application? Same application. Where it is looking for database configurations? Within the same application. See, where is your model is? Your model is there in the same application or different application? Same application. Then you should tell, my model is there in the same application. So you say db dot create all, right? When you say db dot create all, what it is creating? Database. And within that database you should create what? Table. And table means, what is a table represent here? Model. But how this create table method search for the table? How it will search for the model? Where it will search for the model? It will search for the model within the application context. Context means, what do you call it as? Workspace. Okay, now this is your application class context, object context. What object context contain? Instance variables. What object context contain? Instance variables. What class context contain? Class variables. Okay, right? So what is application context contain? Model. Where is your application what application context contain? Model. What is the name of the model is? Student model. Now it is using the student model to create all the tables. Okay, right? So after this, actually you don't require to deploy in the server, because we have not done any, what do you call it as, develop any web application. You can run directly. What you can do, you can run directly, right? Yes. Now, what you do after this is go to the terminal. We'll see. So Python application one dot py, no module. SQL, uh, not imported. Installed or not installed. Where it is installed. So I've written wrong. Yeah, what happened here? So where it is looking for path, path is 3.12. It is installing. Let me. AL, SQL. Already there. Configure. This is not configure. So some simple mistakes here. Now run the application. Debugger. Smaller. Small or capital? Small. Now you can see there is one folder created here. What is the name of the folder is instance. And within this folder, there is one database. What is the name of the database? DB SQLite 3. Now database is created. Now simple mistake here. Flask underscore SQL alchemy import. What is the name of the class is? Same, right? And here debug equal to true. Now, whenever you run this, it will create one folder. What is the name of the folder is? Instance. And inside this folder, now there is database. And what is the name of the database is db.sqlite 3, right? So once the database is created, you can perform different operations over here. Okay. Yeah, we just assign wrong import. Here I just write SQL underscore alchemy, but actually it is Flask underscore SQL. So this is your module name, right? Okay. So still it is doing it something. Okay, right? Yeah. Once it is done, what you have to do next? When you can do all the operations like the crude operations, you can do all operations like inserting, updating, and what operations you can do it deleting. What you are over, Chandan Roy? It is over here. Import from Flask underscore SQL Alchemy. Import SQL Alchemy. Over. Okay. All right. Now after this, what I have to do? I have to insert the data. I have to delete the data. I have to update the data. Right. But I cannot view this. If I want to view this, I need to add one extension, right? I need to add one extension. Okay. What is that extension is SQLite extension, right? So we'll add SQLite viewer, right? So where you can see the SQLite. Okay, I just install this. Anything you have so many things. Okay, done. Done. Okay. So now come to your application and you can view here. You can see one table is created, and what is the table is student and having roll number, name, and course. Okay, right? So try to add one extension to view the view SQLite database. So but this folder is get created automatically. Okay. Then next is, but how many times it will do this? Whenever you run the application, will it create a new instance? No. Okay, this is done how many times here? Only one time. If it is exists, it doesn't create it. If it does not exist, then only it will create it. Okay. Then after this, next is inserting data. Okay, next is inserting data. I'm writing directly here only. This is nothing but inserting. We'll develop application later. Inserting data. I stop the server. Okay. Okay, inserting data. Inserting data. Now inserting is nothing but what? How to create a record? How to create a record? Yeah. How to create? Create which instance? Model instance. Create which instance? Model instance. Model is a table. Model instance is row. Model is a table and model instance is a row. Create a row. Stud equal to student. Stud equal to student. Define. Roll number is 1. Name is. Define the name of the student. Define the name of the student and define the course of the student. Okay. Define the name of the student and course of the student. Right. So what is the name of the model name is student. Then after this, you have to add, we created model. Creating model is nothing but creating a row. But this row has to be inserted into what? Database. This row should be added to what? Database. Okay. But there in Django, you create a model instance and say save. When you say save, it will save it. Okay. But here it doesn't do that. Okay. You created only model instance. You created object. but this object has to be inserted into what? Database table. For that, you will say db dot db is referring to database. DB referring to what? Database. Which database? DB dot SQLite3. DB dot DB dot. So DB refers to a database and DB dot session. DB dot what here? Session. Session. Okay, whenever you establish connection, right? Whenever you establish connection, your database create what? Session. Database create what? Session. Okay. So whenever you do inserting, updating, deleting, okay, all these are done within the session. Until unless you don't say commit, the changes will not be done on what? Database. So session, for every client, it creates what? Session, where you perform insertion, updation, and what? Deletion. So db.session. Okay, db dot session. Session means you are doing operations within the session. Until unless you don't say what? Commit. The changes will not be done in the database. So session is providing which method? Add method. Is nothing but logical database. Physical, logical. Now you are adding in which database? Logical database. When you say save or commit, the changes will done in which database? Physical. It means these changes are viewed by only this particular application, but not visible to what? Another application, because it is inserted within what? Session. It is inserted within the session of this client, but it is not inserted into what? Database. Okay, so db.session.add, what you are adding here? Stud. You are adding stud. Add is nothing but adding a row. You are adding a row by using a method called which one? Add. Okay, done this. Now, what will happen if I run this code? See here. What will happen if I run this code? Okay, now, now it is given. So because we have, yes, what we have done is, so with every time app dot, what is this? App underscore which one? Or app underscore which one? Context. Because it should use which context? Application context. With the context, db dot session dot add. Okay, the context. Sorry, because it should use the configuration. I should use what here? Configuration. So every time you have to use this. Context is compulsory because you are trying to perform all this by using which operation? Uh, by using configuration details given in which one? Application context. So compulsory you have to write with application context create model with application context. What do you have to do? What do you have to do? You have to insert what? Data. But when you write here add, run the server. Okay, run the server here. Okay, now is it row is inserted or not inserted here? Can you find any row here? No, because we added only within the session. Because we added only in the session. But from session, it should add into what? Table. From session, your logical database you should add into what? Physical database. For that, you have to say db dot session dot commit. So commit is nothing but saving changes from session to what? Database. Saving changes from session to what? Database. That is done by using one method called which one? Commit. Save permanently. Save permanently within the database. From session into what? Database. Okay. Now open this. Now here, can you see it? No, because you have to run the application again. See, actually, you don't require to run the server here because we are not using any view. We are not using any view, right? So you can directly run the programs, simple programs, application 1.py, application 1.py, parameter one, sorry, roll number, name, and what course. You should not give column names. Okay, it's saying that this is unique. Already there. Refresh. One is there already. So give another row because it is changed. Uh, so we'll give another roll number two. Roll number two, you can input during runtime. So then give what is the name of this is Java because roll number is primary key, right? Run the program. Now it is done. So what happened here? This is also two is also inserted. It should not run the server actually. Okay, because we don't have any view here. We have any view or we don't have any view? Not having any view. Okay, should not run the server here. Okay, so this is not required actually because we don't have any view. So application context roll number, just enter roll number 3 directly, and this is a name. Okay, this is a name, and this is what now? Course. So db.session.add, which object you are adding? Student, and db.session.commit. So it is done. This is in debug.